The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in the dusty main street of Winslow, Arizona Territory, and Evelyn Morgan tumbled against the worn leather seat, her spectacles sliding down her nose as the driver shouted something unintelligible from above. It was August of 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small frontier town that would become her new home. Evelyn pushed her wire-rimmed glasses back up, smoothed her plain brown traveling dress, and tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she had never met, a rancher named Thomas Pritchard, who had responded to her carefully worded advertisement in the Matrimonial Gazette. Their correspondence over the past 6 months had been brief but seemingly promising. He had written that he needed a practical wife who could read and write, help with accounts, and bring some civilization to his remote ranch. She had written that she needed security and a fresh start far from the whispers and pitying looks that followed her everywhere after her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand to help her down. Evelyn stepped carefully onto the hard, packed earth, her small carpetbag clutched tightly in one hand. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings that seemed to lean wearily against each other. A saloon, a general store, what appeared to be a hotel, and a few other establishments she could not immediately identify. Dust devils swirled in the spaces between buildings, and the air smelled of horse manure, sage, and something cooking that made her empty stomach clench with hunger. "Miss Morgan." A man approached from the direction of the general store, but it was not the man from the photograph Thomas Pritchard had sent. This man was shorter, rounder, with thinning hair and nervous eyes that would not quite meet hers. "I'm Henry Watts, foreman at the Pritchard Ranch." Evelyn felt the first flutter of real unease. "Where is Mr. Pritchard? He wrote that he would meet me here personally." Henry Watts removed his hat and twisted it in his hands, a gesture that made her stomach drop. "Well now, miss, that's the thing. Mr. Pritchard, he had some business come up. Important business. He sent me to fetch you out to the ranch." It was not an auspicious beginning, but Evelyn had come too far to turn back now. She had sold everything she owned to pay for the journey, and her cousin in Boston had made it quite clear that there was no room for her in their crowded household. She nodded stiffly. "Very well, Mr. Watts. I assume we will depart soon." "The journey was quite long, and I confess I am eager to arrive." "About that, miss." Henry cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The ranch is a good 3 hours' ride from here, and it's getting on toward late afternoon. Might be better if you stayed at the hotel tonight and we headed out fresh in the morning. I could introduce you to some of the townfolk, make you feel more welcome and such." Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion erupted from down the street. A horse had broken free from the hitching post outside the saloon and was rearing and bucking, scattering pedestrians in all directions. Without thinking, Evelyn dropped her carpetbag and moved toward the frightened animal, making soft, clicking sounds with her tongue. She had grown up around horses in better days, when her father's stables had been the finest in Boston, and she recognized panic when she saw it. "Miss, you better stay back," Henry called out, but Evelyn ignored him. She approached the horse from the side, keeping her movements slow and steady, continuing the soft, rhythmic sounds that her father's grooms had taught her. The horse's eyes rolled white with fear, but gradually its movements began to settle. Evelyn reached out carefully and caught the trailing reins, then stroked the animal's sweating neck until it stood trembling but calm. "Well, I'll be damned." The voice came from behind her, deep and rich with genuine surprise. "Pardon my language, madam, but I haven't seen anyone settle storm that quick except myself." Evelyn turned to find herself looking up at a man who seemed to embody everything she had imagined about the West. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of sage smoke. His brown hair needed cutting and fell nearly to his shoulders, and several days' worth of dark stubble shadowed his jaw. He wore dusty denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster tied down in a way that suggested he knew how to use the weapon it held. He was perhaps 26 or 27, she guessed, only a few years older than her own 23 years. "Your horse?" Evelyn asked, still keeping one hand on the animal's neck. "My horse, my responsibility for not tying him proper." He stepped forward and took the reins from her with a nod of thanks. "Name's Quinn Ellis. My friends call me Quinn. Evelyn Morgan." She suddenly became aware of how disheveled she must look after days of travel, how her brown hair was escaping its pins, how dusty and rumpled her dress had become. She resisted the urge to try to tidy herself. Quinn Ellis was studying her with unconcealed interest, and something in his gaze made her feel both uncomfortable and oddly warm. "You must be Pritchard's mail-order bride. Heard you were coming in today." The term stung, though it was accurate enough. "I prefer to think of myself as his intended wife, Mr. Ellis." "No offense meant, madam." His expression softened. "It takes courage to come out here to marry a stranger. Most women wouldn't have the nerve." Before she could respond, Henry Watts bustled up, looking flustered. "Miss Morgan, you should not have put yourself at risk like that. If something had happened to you, Mr. Pritchard would have had my hide." "But nothing did happen, Mr. Watts." Evelyn brushed dust from her skirts. "The horse was merely frightened, not vicious." "Still, a lady has no business handling fractious animals." Henry took her elbow with proprietary concern. "Let me escort you to the hotel. You can have a hot meal and a good rest before we head to the ranch tomorrow." Quinn Ellis caught her eye over Henry's head, and she could have sworn she saw sympathy in his expression, mixed with something else she could not quite identify. He touched the brim of his hat in farewell. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Morgan. I hope you find everything you are looking for out here." There was something in his tone that suggested he doubted she would, but Evelyn lifted her chin and met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis. I intend to make the best of my new circumstances." She allowed Henry to lead her toward the hotel, but she could feel Quinn's eyes on her back the entire way. It made her skin tingle in a way that was entirely inappropriate for a woman about to marry another man. The hotel was a modest establishment with faded wallpaper and creaking floorboards, but the room Henry secured for her was clean enough, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the main street. He left her with promises to return in an hour to escort her to supper at the restaurant next door. Alone for the first time in days, Evelyn sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of doubt. What was she doing here? She had built this decision on practicality and necessity, but now that she had arrived, the reality of marrying a complete stranger felt overwhelming. She pulled Thomas Pritchard's letters from her bag and read them again, searching for reassurance. His handwriting was bold and confident, his words practical but not unkind. He had a ranch of 2,000 acres, he wrote, with good water and decent grazing. He had built a solid house and was doing well enough to afford hired help. What he needed was a wife who could manage the household, keep accounts, and perhaps teach any children they might have to read and write. He had included a photograph taken in town, showing a man of perhaps 40 with a stern face and dark hair going gray at the temples. It was a reasonable arrangement, Evelyn told herself firmly. She would have security and a purpose. He would have a competent helpmate. Many successful marriages had been built on less. She washed as best she could with the tepid water in the basin, changed into her other dress, which was only slightly less rumpled than the first, and tried to pin her hair into something resembling order. Her reflection in the small, spotted mirror was not encouraging. She had never been pretty, she knew. Her face was too long, her nose too sharp, her mouth too wide. The wire-rimmed spectacles perched on her nose did nothing to improve matters. Her figure was thin and angular rather than fashionably curved. But she had learned long ago that intelligence and capability were worth more than beauty, at least in theory. Henry collected her precisely 1 hour later and walked her to the restaurant, keeping up a steady stream of nervous chatter about the ranch and the town. The restaurant was nearly empty at this early hour, just a few men at the bar and an elderly couple in one corner. Henry ordered for both of them without consulting her, which irritated Evelyn, but she bit her tongue. Perhaps this was simply Western custom. The food, when it arrived, was surprisingly good. Beef steak, potatoes, green beans that must have come from someone's carefully tended garden, and fresh bread with butter. Evelyn ate hungrily, not realizing how famished she had been until the food was in front of her. "Mr. Pritchard runs a good operation," Henry was saying between bites. "One of the most successful ranches in the territory. He is a fair man, firm but fair. I have worked for him near on 6 years now." "And what is the house like?" Evelyn asked. In his letters, Mr. Pritchard mentioned it was comfortable, but he did not give many details. Henry shifted in his seat. "Well, it is solid built, that's certain. Stone and timber, holds up well against the weather. Got a good roof, real glass windows. It is maybe not as fancy as what you are used to back east, but it is respectable." Evelyn wanted to laugh at the idea that she had been living in fancy circumstances, but she simply nodded. "I am not concerned with fancy, Mr. Watts. I am looking for a home, not a showplace." They were finishing their meal when the door opened and Quinn Ellis walked in. He spotted them immediately and hesitated, as if considering whether to leave, but then squared his shoulders and approached their table. "Evening, Henry." He nodded to the foreman, then turned to Evelyn. "Miss Morgan, I hope your meal was satisfactory." "It was excellent, thank you." She was acutely aware that she had a spot of gravy on her cuff and that her hair had already begun escaping its pins again. "Do you live here in town, Mr. Ellis?" "Got a small spread about 5 miles north of here." He turned his hat in his hands in a gesture that reminded her oddly of Henry's earlier nervousness, though Quinn carried himself with considerably more confidence. "Nothing fancy, but it is mine. Been building it up for the past 3 years." "Quinn here used to work for Mr. Pritchard," Henry interjected, his tone carrying an edge that Evelyn could not quite interpret, "before he decided to strike out on his own." "A man should build his own future if he can," Quinn said evenly, but Evelyn noticed the tightness around his eyes. There was history here, tension between these two men that went beyond simple workplace separation. Indeed, Evelyn found herself wanting to ease the awkwardness. "I admire anyone willing to work for their independence. It cannot be easy starting fresh in such challenging territory." Quinn's expression softened as he looked at her. "No, madam, it is not easy, but some things are worth the struggle." He settled his hat back on his head. "I will let you folks finish your evening. Miss Morgan, I hope everything works out well for you at the Pritchard place." After he left, Henry made a sound of disapproval. "That man has ideas above his station. Mr. Pritchard gave him steady work and good wages, but Quinn got it into his head that he needed to be his own boss. Took out a loan from the bank for that hard-scrabble piece of land and has been barely scraping by ever since, from what I hear." Evelyn found herself wanting to defend Quinn Ellis, though she could not have said why. Perhaps he values independence over security. Not everyone makes the same choices. Well, out here, practical matters more than pride. Henry signaled for more coffee. Mr. Pritchard understands that. He has built something solid and lasting. That is what matters in the end. That night, lying in the narrow hotel bed, Evelyn could not sleep. The sounds of the town filtered through her window. The occasional shout from the saloon, the clop of horse hooves, the barking of dogs. She thought about Thomas Pritchard, waiting at his ranch for the practical wife he had ordered through the mail. She thought about Henry Watts and his nervous deference. And despite her best efforts not to, she thought about Quinn Ellis and the way his eyes had held both sadness and strength when he looked at her. She was being foolish, she told herself firmly. Quinn Ellis was nothing to her, just a stranger she had met on the street. Her future lay with Thomas Pritchard, for better or worse. She had made her choice and traveled 2,000 miles to honor it. One chance meeting with a handsome cowboy changed nothing. But when she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, it was sage-gray eyes she saw in her dreams. Morning came too soon, announced by the sound of wagons rattling past and roosters crowing. Evelyn rose, washed, and dressed in her traveling clothes once more. She packed her few belongings, settled her bill with the hotel keeper, and met Henry Watts in the lobby just as the sun was fully clearing the eastern horizon. A wagon waited outside, loaded with supplies from the general store. Henry helped her onto the seat and climbed up beside her, taking the reins with practiced ease. They set off through town at a steady pace, heading west into country that grew progressively more rugged and wild. The landscape had a harsh beauty that Evelyn found herself responding to despite her anxiety. Red rock formations rose like ancient monuments against the impossibly blue sky. Sage and scrub dotted the earth, interspersed with twisted juniper trees. In the distance, purple mountains wavered in the heat shimmer. It was nothing like the green, ordered landscape of Massachusetts, but there was something honest about it, something that called to a part of her she had not known existed. They had been riding for perhaps an hour when Henry suddenly drew the wagon to a halt. A rider was approaching from the west, moving fast. As he drew nearer, Evelyn recognized the horse and rider both. Quinn Ellis reined in beside the wagon, his face tight with concern. "Henry, you heading to the Pritchard place? Where else would I be heading?" Henry's tone was defensive. Taking Miss Morgan to meet her intended as arranged. Quinn's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. "You might want to prepare her better than you have been then. It is not right letting her go in there blind. I do not know what you mean." But Henry would not meet Quinn's eyes, and Evelyn felt her stomach clench with sudden dread. "The hell you do not." Quinn turned to Evelyn, and she saw both anger and compassion in his face. "Miss Morgan, I am going to tell you something that Henry here should have told you yesterday. Thomas Pritchard is not the man you think he is. The photograph he sent you, that was taken 10 years ago at least. He is not looking for a wife so much as unpaid labor. The last woman who came out to marry him left after 3 months, and the one before that lasted barely a week." "That is a damned lie." Henry's face flushed red. "Quinn Ellis, you have no right spreading such slander. You left Mr. Pritchard's employ under a cloud, and everyone knows you have held a grudge ever since." "I left because I would not be party to the way he treats people," Quinn shot back. "And it is not slander if it is the truth." Evelyn held up a hand, her head spinning. "Gentlemen, please." "Mr. Ellis, I appreciate your concern, but I have corresponded with Mr. Pritchard for months. We have an arrangement. I cannot simply turn back now based on accusations from someone I met yesterday." Quinn's expression turned frustrated. "You are right, we are strangers. But I am asking you to trust me anyway. At least wait. Come into town and talk to some of the townspeople. Find out more before you commit yourself to a situation you might not be able to leave. Mr. Pritchard is expecting me today." Evelyn tried to keep her voice steady despite the fear creeping through her. "I am not in a position to change plans on a whim. I have no money for extended lodging, no means to return east even if I wished to. This is my only option, Mr. Ellis." Something shifted in Quinn's face, a decision made. "Then I am coming with you. At least let me see you settled proper before I go." "Now see here," Henry began, but Evelyn cut him off. "Mr. Watts, I think it would be prudent to have another witness present when I meet Mr. Pritchard for the first time. Mr. Ellis may accompany us if he wishes." She turned to Quinn. "Though I must tell you, I still intend to honor my commitment unless I find compelling reason not to." Quinn nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I just want to make sure you have a real choice, Miss Morgan. That is all." The three of them continued in uncomfortable silence, the wagon creaking along the rutted track with Quinn riding alongside on Storm. Evelyn's mind churned with doubts and questions. What if Quinn was right? What if she had traded one impossible situation for another? But what choice did she have? She could not return east with no money and no prospects. Perhaps Thomas Pritchard was difficult, but she had dealt with difficult people before. She was strong, practical, capable. She would make the best of whatever she found. The Pritchard ranch came into view around midday, sprawling across a valley with decent water from a creek that ran year-round, Henry explained. The house was indeed solid, built of stone and timber as promised, larger than she had expected. Outbuildings dotted the property, barns and corrals and bunkhouses. Cattle grazed on the slopes, hundreds of them bearing the Pritchard brand. But as they drew closer, Evelyn noticed things that troubled her. The house, while structurally sound, showed signs of neglect. Weeds grew tall around the foundation. A shutter hung crooked. The yard was littered with equipment in various states of repair. It did not look like a home so much as a place where someone slept between working. A man emerged from the house as they pulled into the yard, and Evelyn's heart sank. This was Thomas Pritchard, but he bore only passing resemblance to the photograph he had sent. He was indeed going gray, but he had not mentioned the substantial belly straining against his vest, or the florid complexion that spoke of too much whiskey, or the way his eyes were hard and measuring as they swept over her. "So you are the Morgan woman." His voice was rough, not cruel but not kind either. "Took your time getting here." Evelyn climbed down from the wagon with as much dignity as she could muster. "The journey from Boston took 3 weeks, Mr. Pritchard. I came as quickly as was feasible." He grunted and turned his attention to Quinn. "What are you doing here, Ellis? This is not your concern, making it my concern." Quinn dismounted and stood with easy confidence, though Evelyn noticed his hand stayed near his gun. "Wanted to make sure Miss Morgan arrived safe and was treated proper." "She is none of your business." Thomas's face darkened. "You got no claim here. Best mount up and head back to that failing ranch of yours before you are not welcome to leave at all." The threat hung in the air between them. Henry looked acutely uncomfortable, caught between his employer and his former co-worker. Evelyn found her voice, trying to diffuse the tension. "Mr. Pritchard, I appreciate Mr. Ellis's concern, but he is right that this is between you and me. Perhaps we could speak privately about the arrangements we discussed in our letters." Thomas looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "You are not what I pictured from your letter, thinner than I expected, plain too. You said you could work hard, keep a house proper, help with accounts. That all true?" Anger flared hot in Evelyn's chest, burning away her anxiety. She had traveled 2,000 miles, sold everything she owned, pinned all her hopes on this arrangement, and he was disappointed that she was not pretty enough. She drew herself up to her full height, which was considerable for a woman, and met his eyes without flinching. "I am exactly what I said I was in my letters, Mr. Pritchard. Educated, capable, and hard-working. If my appearance is disappointing to you, I am sorry for it, but it has no bearing on my ability to fulfill the role you described needing filled. Got some spine to you at least." Thomas almost sounded approving. "Well, come inside then. Henry, get her bag. Ellis, you have seen her delivered safe. Time for you to go." But Quinn did not move. "Miss Morgan, are you certain about this? Say the word and I will take you back to town right now. No questions asked." Evelyn looked at the house, at Thomas Pritchard's hard face, at the neglected yard and the isolated location. Every instinct screamed at her to accept Quinn's offer, to run while she still could. But where would she run to? She had no money, no prospects, nowhere to go. This was the bed she had made through her letters and her desperation. Now she had to lie in it. "I am certain," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Ellis, but I will be fine." Quinn's face showed his frustration and something else, something that looked like genuine pain. "If you need anything, anything at all, my place is 5 miles north of town on the Creek Road. Anyone can tell you how to find it. Promise me you will come if you need help." "She will not be needing help from the likes of you," Thomas growled. "Now get off my land, Ellis, before I have you thrown off." Quinn held Evelyn's gaze for a long moment, and she tried to convey with her eyes what she could not say aloud. That she appreciated his kindness, that she would remember his offer, that she wished circumstances were different. Then he mounted Storm and wheeled the horse around, riding away without looking back. Thomas watched him go with satisfaction. "That man has been a thorn in my side since he decided his sweat was worth more than my gold. Come on inside, woman. We got things to discuss." The interior of the house was as neglected as the exterior. The main room held rough furniture and reeked of tobacco smoke and unwashed dishes. Through doorways, Evelyn glimpsed a kitchen in chaos and bedrooms that looked equally uncared for. Her heart sank further. "The last woman I tried to bring out here was useless," Thomas said, pouring himself whiskey from a bottle on the sideboard. "He did not offer her any. Complained constantly, could not cook worth a damn, cried all the time. Waste of money bringing her out. I sent her packing after 3 months. Before that was another one, even worse. Lasted a week before she ran off in the night." He took a long drink. "You going to be like that? Useless and complaining?" "No," Evelyn said quietly. "I am not." She looked around the filthy room, at the dishes piled in the kitchen, at the dirt tracked across the floors. "But I will need supplies to clean properly, and time to organize things. This house needs a great deal of work." "House is fine as it is." "The house is a disaster, Mr. Pritchard, and you know it." She surprised herself with her boldness. "You said you wanted a wife to bring some civilization to your ranch. That means cleaning, organizing, and maintaining a proper household. I can do that, but I will need your cooperation." He studied her with narrow eyes. "You got more backbone than I expected. Good. You are going to need it. Work starts at dawn on a ranch and does not end until dark. I will expect you to cook, clean, wash, mend, help with accounts, and anything else that needs doing. In return, you will have a roof over your head and food to eat. If you do well, we will get married proper in a few months." "A few months?" Evelyn's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Mr. Pritchard, I came here as your intended bride. We had an arrangement." "Arrangement was you would be my wife, and you will be, if you prove yourself worth marrying." He poured another drink. "But I am not fool enough to rush into legal bonds with a woman I just met, no matter what letters we exchanged. You want marriage, you will earn it by showing me you can handle ranch life. If you cannot, You will leave just like the others did." It was a trap, Evelyn realized. She had walked into a trap baited with pretty words in letters. He had no intention of marrying her, not really. He just wanted cheap labor disguised as courtship. The other women had realized it and left, but they must have had money or family to return to. She had neither. "I understand." Her voice came out flat and defeated. "Good. Henry will bring you supplies from town as needed. Your room is up the stairs, second door on the right. Get yourself settled, then come down and start on something for supper. I will have 6 ranch hands to feed along with myself." He turned away dismissively. "And see if you can make the coffee proper. Last woman made it weak as tea." Evelyn climbed the stairs with her carpetbag, fighting back tears of anger and despair. The room he had indicated was small and spare, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for storage. At least it was clean or cleaner than the rest of the house. A window looked out over the ranch toward the mountains in the distance. She sat on the bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel sorry for herself. 5 minutes to acknowledge that she had made a terrible mistake, that she was trapped in an impossible situation, that the practical marriage she had envisioned was actually exploitation disguised as courtship. 5 minutes to remember sage gray eyes and a concerned voice offering her escape. Then she stood up, washed her face, and went downstairs to start fixing supper for 7 hungry men. She had learned long ago that survival sometimes meant doing what needed to be done, even when your heart was breaking. The weeks that followed settled into a grueling routine. Evelyn rose before dawn to start breakfast for the men, cleaned the chaotic house room by room, washed clothes in the creek, mended torn shirts and trousers, helped Thomas with his account books in the evenings, and fell into bed each night exhausted to the bone. The work was endless and the appreciation non-existent. Thomas criticized more than he praised, found fault with meals and mending, and drank steadily from morning to night. The ranch hands treated her with wary distance, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to cross their employer. She wrote no letters back east. What would she say? That she had been a fool, that she had traded one form of poverty for another, that she was trapped in a situation with no good way out. A month passed, then 6 weeks. The house began to look less chaotic under her determined efforts, but Evelyn herself grew thinner, more worn. She caught herself staring out windows toward town, toward the north where she knew Quinn Ellis had his small ranch, and hated herself for the weakness. Then one October morning, everything changed. Evelyn was at the creek doing laundry when she heard horses approaching at a gallop. She looked up to see 3 riders approaching the house, moving with purpose. They wore rough clothes and had bandanas tied around their necks, and something about their posture set off every warning bell in her mind. She abandoned the laundry and hurried back toward the house, arriving just as Thomas emerged with his rifle. The ranch hands were scattered around the property, too far to help immediately. The 3 riders reined in their horses in the yard, and the leader, a man with cold eyes and a scar across his cheek, addressed Thomas. "Pritchard, we have business to discuss." "I got no business with you, Gaines." Thomas's voice was steady, but Evelyn could see tension in the way he held the rifle. "Get off my land." "See, that is where you are wrong." The man called Gaines leaned forward in his saddle. "You have been expanding your herd onto the North Range, running your cattle on water that is not yours to use. That stops now. That range is open territory. No one owns it. Ellis owns it now, bought it legal from the territory office 2 weeks ago. And he is not interested in sharing water with rustlers and claim jumpers like you. Ellis." Thomas spat the name like a curse. "That bastard has no business buying range land. He cannot afford it. He found a way." Now you are going to move your cattle back to your own land, or we are going to move them for you. Your choice." Evelyn saw Thomas's knuckles whiten on the rifle. She saw the way the three men sat their horses, ready for violence. She saw how isolated they were, how quickly this could turn deadly. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Gentlemen, surely this can be resolved without threats." Her voice came out calmer than she felt. "Mr. Gaines, is it? If there is a legitimate property dispute, perhaps it should be taken to the territorial authorities rather than settled with guns." Gaines turned his attention to her for the first time, and she saw his eyes widen slightly. "You are the mail order woman. Heard you were out here." His expression softened marginally. "Madam, with respect, this does not concern you. This is between Ellis and Pritchard. If guns are about to be drawn on property where I am standing, it concerns me very much." Evelyn was amazed at her own boldness. "Mr. Pritchard, these men are right that a property dispute should be resolved legally. Move the cattle back to your own range and contest the land purchase through proper channels if you believe it is invalid." Thomas rounded on her, his face purple with rage. "You will shut your mouth, woman. This is not your concern. Someone needs to show some sense before people are killed." She stood her ground even as her heart hammered. "You cannot win a gunfight against three men, and even if you could, what good would it do? Move the cattle peacefully and fight this in court." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Gaines surprised her by laughing. "She has more sense than you do, Pritchard. Listen to your woman. Move the cattle and there will be no trouble." He tipped his hat to Evelyn. "Madam, Quinn Ellis is lucky to have you speaking reason. Maybe you should be working for him instead of this fool." The three riders turned and left at a leisurely pace, confident in their message delivered. Thomas stood rigid with fury until they were out of sight, then turned on Evelyn with a roar. "How dare you undermine me in front of those men? You made me look weak. I prevented you from being killed." Evelyn shot back, her own anger finally breaking free. "You were about to start a gunfight you could not win. Someone needed to show some sense." His hand came up and she flinched, but he stopped himself, breathing hard. "Get back to work," he growled, "and stay out of matters you do not understand. You have embarrassed me enough for one day." Evelyn fled to the house, shaking with reaction. She leaned against the wall of the kitchen, trying to calm her racing heart. She had almost been struck. If Thomas had lost control for just one more second, he would have hit her. And she realized with crystal clarity that she could not stay here any longer. Whatever happened, whatever it cost her, she had to leave this place. That evening she waited until Thomas had drunk himself into his usual stupor and the ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse. Then she packed her carpet bag with her few belongings, took what little money she had earned by doing mending for some of the hands, and slipped out into the night. She had no real plan beyond reaching town. Perhaps she could find work at the hotel or restaurant. Perhaps there was a family that needed a teacher or governess. Perhaps she could save enough for passage back east, though the thought of returning in defeat made her stomach turn. She just knew she could not spend another night under Thomas Pritchard's roof. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see the road. Evelyn walked steadily, her bag growing heavier with each mile. She had gone perhaps 2 miles when she heard a horse behind her. Fear shot through her. Had Thomas woken and realized she was gone? She stepped off the road, preparing to hide, but the rider had already spotted her. "Miss Morgan," relief flooded through her. "Mr. Ellis." Quinn dismounted quickly and approached her, concern written across his face. "What are you doing walking alone in the dark? Where are you going?" "Away." The word came out more desperately than she intended. "I am leaving the Pritchard ranch. I cannot stay there any longer." In the moonlight, she saw his expression shift through several emotions before settling on grim satisfaction. "I am glad you finally saw sense." "Come on, I will take you into town. You can ride with me." But Evelyn did not move. "Why are you out here at this hour, Mr. Ellis? Surely you were not simply riding past." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I have been keeping an eye on the place when I could, making sure you were all right. Tonight I saw you leave and wanted to make sure you reached town safe. You have been watching for weeks. Someone needed to." His voice was quiet. "I could not stop thinking about you out there, could not shake the feeling that things were wrong. I was right, was I not?" "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Everything was wrong. He never intended to marry me, just wanted unpaid labor. Today he almost struck me. I realized I had to leave before things got worse." Quinn's jaw clenched. "I should ride back there and teach him a lesson about how to treat a lady." "No." Evelyn put a hand on his arm without thinking. "No more violence. I just want to leave peacefully and try to rebuild some kind of life." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face, and something passed between them that made Evelyn's breath catch. "Come on," he said softly. "But I am not taking you to town. I am taking you to my place. You can stay there tonight where I know you are safe, and we will figure out the rest tomorrow. Mr. Ellis, I cannot stay at your ranch alone with you. The impropriety. There is a family about a mile from my place, the Johnsons. Good people. If it makes you more comfortable, we can wake them up and you can stay there. But it is another hour's ride to town and you are exhausted. My place is just 20 minutes from here." Evelyn knew she should insist on going to town. But she was exhausted, bone-weary in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. And she trusted Quinn Ellis in a way she had never trusted Thomas Pritchard, despite their brief acquaintance. "The Johnsons would take me in. Martha Johnson will likely adopt you on the spot. She is always saying they do not get enough visitors." Quinn held out his hand. "Come on, Miss Morgan. Let me help you properly this time." She took his hand and let him lift her onto Storm's back, then mounted behind her. His arm came around her waist to steady her, and Evelyn allowed herself to lean back against his solid warmth. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than afraid. Quinn's ranch was indeed modest compared to Thomas Pritchard's spread, but what it lacked in size it made up for in care. Even in the moonlight, Evelyn could see that the small house was well maintained, the yard neat, the barn and corrals in good repair. This was a place someone cared about, was building with love and attention. They stopped first at the Johnson homestead, where Martha Johnson answered their knock in her nightgown, and immediately insisted that Evelyn come inside. Martha was a round, cheerful woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Quinn told us about you being out at Pritchard's," she said, ushering Evelyn into the warm kitchen. "I was hoping you would have the sense to leave. That man goes through mail-order brides like some men go through whiskey. Come on, dear, you can sleep in our daughter's room. She married last spring and we have the space." "I do not want to impose," Evelyn began, but Martha waved her protests away. "Nonsense. We are glad for the company. Quinn, you head on home. I will take good care of Miss Morgan here and you can come by in the morning to discuss what comes next." Quinn hesitated at the door, his eyes on Evelyn. "You are safe here. Get some rest. We will figure everything out tomorrow, I promise." After he left, Martha showed Evelyn to a small, tidy bedroom and brought her a nightgown. "Now you just rest, dear. Things always look better in the morning. Although I will say, if you need a place to stay more permanently, we could use some help with the children and the household. My husband and sons work our claim, and I could use another woman's help. We could not pay much, but room and board would be included." "That is very generous." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "I would be grateful to work for my keep until I can make other arrangements. We will talk more tomorrow. Sleep now." But despite her exhaustion, Evelyn lay awake for some time, her mind churning. She had escaped Thomas Pritchard, but now what? She could work for the Johnsons, which would give her time to save money and make plans. Perhaps she could eventually afford passage back east, though the thought still filled her with shame. Or perhaps she could find a position here in the territory, build a new life on her own terms. She tried not to think about sage gray eyes and gentle hands lifting her onto a horse. Tried not to think about a man who had watched over her safety without being asked, who had offered help without conditions. Quinn Ellis was being kind, nothing more. She would do well to remember that and not build fairy tales in her mind. Morning brought sunlight and the smell of coffee and bacon. Evelyn rose and dressed in her brown traveling dress, which was now showing serious wear, then ventured into the kitchen where Martha was cooking breakfast for what seemed like an army. "Good morning, dear. I hope you slept well. My husband Ben is already out with our boys, but Quinn stopped by earlier and will be back after morning chores to talk with you." Martha handed her a cup of coffee. "Now, tell me what really happened out at Pritchard's place. Quinn said you left on your own, which shows good sense." Over breakfast, Evelyn found herself telling Martha everything. The letters, the false promises, the endless work and constant criticism, the 3 riders and Thomas's near violent response, her final decision to leave. Martha listened with increasing indignation, occasionally making disapproving sounds. That man should be ashamed of himself, treating women that way. Using legal marriage as bait to get free labor. It is despicable. She refilled Evelyn's coffee cup. "But you are safe now, and we will make sure you stay that way. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need." Quinn arrived mid-morning, looking freshly washed and shaved, his brown hair still damp. Evelyn's heart did something complicated when he walked through the door, his eyes going to her immediately with clear relief. "Miss Morgan, I am glad to see you looking better this morning, thanks to you and the Johnsons." Evelyn set down her coffee cup. "Mr. Ellis, I need to thank you properly for your help. You barely know me, yet you have been extraordinarily kind. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "Most people would have minded their own business. You chose to help a stranger multiple times, and I am grateful." Quinn pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something, Miss Morgan, and I am going to be honest even if it makes me sound like a fool. The first time I saw you in town, something happened. I do not know how to explain it except to say I felt like I was supposed to know you, supposed to help you. When I learned you were going to marry Pritchard, it made me sick because I knew what kind of man he was. I have been checking on you these past weeks not just out of general concern, but because I could not stop thinking about you, wondering if you were safe, hoping you would realize you deserved better." Evelyn stared at him, her heart pounding. "Mr. Ellis, let me finish." He leaned forward, intensity in his voice. "I know you came out here planning to marry someone else. I know you do not know me well and have no reason to trust me beyond what I have shown you these past weeks. But I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that not all men in this territory are like Thomas Pritchard. Stay here with the Johnsons. Let me court you properly. See if maybe what I felt when I first saw you might grow into something real for both of us. You want to court me?" Evelyn's voice came out higher than usual. "But you said yourself, I came here to marry another man. You cannot possibly want someone else's rejected mail-order bride." "You were not rejected," Quinn said firmly. "You rejected him, and rightly so. As for what I want—" He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch gentle. "Miss Morgan, Evelyn, you are not what I pictured either when I thought about finding someone someday. I figured I would meet a local girl eventually, someone who grew up out here and understood ranch life. But then you stepped into the street and calmed my frightened horse, and you looked at me with those intelligent eyes behind your spectacles, and something in me just knew. You are better than any dream I had." Evelyn felt tears spill over and run down her cheeks. "I am not beautiful or accomplished or any of the things a man should want. You are brave and intelligent and capable. You traveled 2,000 miles alone to build a new life. You stood up to 3 armed men to prevent bloodshed. You worked yourself near to exhaustion trying to honor a commitment to a man who did not deserve your loyalty. You are amazing, Evelyn Morgan, and if you cannot see that, then I will just have to spend however long it takes showing you until you believe it. Quinn." His name felt right on her tongue. What if this is just because you feel sorry for me? What if you are being kind out of pity? He stood and came around the table, taking both her hands and drawing her to her feet. "Look at me," he said softly. "Do these look like the eyes of a man acting out of pity?" Evelyn looked up into those sage gray eyes and saw warmth, desire, hope, and something that might have been love beginning to bloom. Her breath caught in her throat. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow," Quinn continued. "I am just asking you to let me court you. Let me take you riding and show you my ranch. Let me bring you wildflowers and make you laugh. Let me prove that I see you, really see you, not as free labor or a convenience, but as a remarkable woman I want to build a life with." "I do not have anything to offer you," Evelyn whispered. "No dowry, no property, nothing but myself and the education my father gave me before he lost everything. Education is valuable out here. We need teachers, need people who can read and write and keep accounts. And as for the rest, I do not want your property or your dowry, I just want you." He squeezed her hands gently. "Say yes, Evelyn. Take a chance on something better than what you settled for with Pritchard." She thought about Thomas Pritchard's cold calculation, his drinking, his house of chaos and neglect. She thought about the weeks of grueling labor with no appreciation or kindness. She thought about being struck at or treated as unpaid servant disguised as bride-to-be. Then she thought about Quinn watching over her safety from a distance, about him riding through the night to make sure she reached safety, about the way his eyes lit when he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was valuable just for being herself. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, I will let you court me properly, Quinn Ellis. Though I warn you, I am practical and serious and not given to romantic notions." He laughed, a sound of pure joy, and before she realized what he intended, he picked her up and spun her around. "That is perfect because I am terrible at romantic notions myself. But I am very good at hard work and building things that last. We will figure out the rest as we go." When he set her down, Evelyn found herself laughing too, really laughing for the first time since she had left Boston. Martha appeared in the doorway, grinning widely. "I take it we are going to have a proper courtship happening on this property?" she asked with satisfaction. "Good. It is about time Quinn found someone and you could use some happiness, Evelyn. Now, we should probably discuss practicalities. Evelyn will stay here with us for propriety's sake while you two get to know each other. Quinn, you will come calling at reasonable hours and always with proper chaperones. We will do this right so there is no hint of scandal." "Yes, madam," Quinn agreed readily. "Whatever makes Evelyn comfortable." The next few weeks fell into a pattern that gradually healed something broken in Evelyn's heart. She worked alongside Martha during the days, helping with cooking, cleaning, mending, and teaching the younger Johnson children to read and write. Martha's husband, Ben, and their 3 sons treated her with easy friendliness, making her feel part of their family rather than an employee. And Quinn came calling 3 or 4 times a week, always in the afternoons, always respectful of propriety and Martha's rules. He brought her books from his small collection, knowing she loved to read. He took her riding across his property, showing her where he planned to build a bigger house someday, where he wanted to plant an orchard, where the water ran clean year-round. He taught her to shoot a rifle, patiently correcting her stance and aim until she could hit a tin can at 20 paces. He told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about heading west after his parents died, about the years he spent working for Thomas Pritchard while saving every penny toward buying his own land. "Why did you really leave Pritchard's employ?" Evelyn asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek that ran through his property. "Henry said there was bad blood between you." Quinn was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "Thomas has no respect for anyone he sees as beneath him, which is pretty much everyone who works for him. I watched him cheat ranch hands out of wages, treat his animals roughly, and run off 2 mail-order brides who were just trying to make the best of a bad situation. The final straw was when he tried to claim water rights that belonged to a Mexican family who had been farming nearby for 3 generations. He was going to force them off their own land through legal tricks and intimidation. What did you do?" "I went to them privately and helped them file the proper paperwork to protect their claim. When Thomas found out, he was furious, told me I was disloyal and fired me on the spot." Quinn smiled without humor. "Best thing that ever happened to me. I had enough saved to buy this place. It is not much yet, but it is mine, built on honest work and fair dealing." That is why those men called Thomas a rustler, Evelyn realized, when they came about the cattle. This is about more than just water rights, is it not? He has a pattern of taking what is not his. "Yes." Quinn looked at her seriously. "I need to tell you something, and you might not like it. The land I bought recently, the North Range that caused that confrontation you saw, I bought it specifically to block Thomas from expanding further. He has been running roughshod over smaller ranchers and homesteaders for years, and someone needed to stand up to him. You made yourself his enemy to help others. I suppose I did." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Does that bother you?" "No." Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest. "It makes me respect you even more. You could have simply left and focused only on your own success, but you chose to help people who could not help themselves. That takes courage, or foolishness." But he was smiling. "Evelyn, there is something else I need to say. I am not a rich man. This ranch is growing, but slowly. I have enough to live on and a little extra, but I cannot offer you the kind of security that someone like Pritchard promised. If we build a life together, it will be modest at best, at least for a few years." "Pritchard promised security and delivered exploitation," Evelyn pointed out. "I would rather have honesty and modest means than false promises and abuse. Even so, I want you to understand what you would be choosing. Life out here is hard. The work never ends. Some years we barely scrape by. It will take years to build something really successful." Evelyn looked around at his small, neat ranch, at the house he had built with his own hands, at the clear creek and the mountains in the distance. She thought about his gentle hands and his kind eyes, about the way he listened when she talked about books or teaching, about how he made her laugh and feel valued. "Quinn, I came west expecting hard work. That does not frighten me. What frightens me is being trapped with someone who does not respect me, who sees me as property rather than partner. If you are offering partnership, true partnership where we build something together with mutual respect, then I do not care if it is modest. That is worth more than all of Pritchard's cattle." He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, holding her close. They had been careful until now, observing Martha's rules about propriety, but here by the creek with no one to see, he held her like she was precious. Evelyn rested her head against his chest and heard the steady beat of his heart. "I am falling in love with you," Quinn said quietly into her hair. I know it is fast, but it is true. You are everything I never knew I needed. I am falling in love with you too." The words came easily because they were true. "You make me feel safe and valued. You make me believe I can build a good life here." He pulled back just enough to look down at her, his eyes full of emotion. "Marry me, Evelyn. Not because you need security or have no other options, but because you want to build a life with me. We will do it right this time, with a proper wedding and vows that mean something to both of us." "Yes." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight rasp of stubble under her fingers. "Yes, I will marry you, Quinn Ellis, because I love you and I trust you and I want to build something beautiful with you." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise and hope. Evelyn had been kissed before, awkward fumbling kisses from boys back in Boston who were more interested in her father's money than in her. This was different. This felt like coming home. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Winslow, with Martha and Ben Johnson standing as witnesses, and what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Evelyn wore a simple dress that Martha had helped her make from fabric Quinn had bought in town, soft blue cotton that matched her eyes. Quinn wore new trousers and a clean shirt, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such joy that people laughed and applauded. The reception was held at the Johnson homestead, with tables set up in the yard groaning under food that various neighbors had contributed. Evelyn met dozens of people whose names she tried desperately to remember, all of them friendly and welcoming. Several women took her aside to tell her how glad they were that Quinn had found someone, how he was a good man who deserved happiness. An older Mexican couple thanked her for marrying someone who had helped them keep their farm, and Evelyn realized these must be the family Quinn had assisted against Thomas Pritchard's schemes. Thomas himself did not attend, of course, though some of his ranch hands did, looking uncomfortable but offering quiet congratulations. Henry Watts was not among them, and Evelyn felt a pang of regret that the nervous foreman had apparently chosen his employer over his conscience. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, Quinn took Evelyn's hand and led her away from the crowd for a moment of quiet. They stood together, looking at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought I would be when I left Boston." Evelyn leaned against him. "I thought I was traveling toward practical necessity. I never imagined I would find love. I never imagined I would be lucky enough to marry someone like you, beautiful, intelligent, brave." Evelyn laughed. "You are the only person who has ever called me beautiful. Then everyone else is blind." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You are beautiful to me, Evelyn, not despite your intelligence and capability, but because of it. The way your eyes light up when you talk about books, the way you stand up for what is right even when you are frightened, the way you gentled my horse without fear. Everything about you is beautiful." She kissed him, there under the emerging stars, with the sounds of celebration drifting from the house behind them. This was real, she thought. Not a practical arrangement or a desperate bargain, but genuine love born from respect and trust. They spent their wedding night at Quinn's ranch, in the small house that would be their home. Quinn had cleaned and tidied everything, put fresh linens on the bed, even picked wildflowers and put them in a jar on the table. It was humble, but it was theirs, built on honest foundation rather than false promises. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but eager. Quinn was patient with her inexperience, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally lay together afterward, tangled in sheets in each other, Evelyn felt a contentment she had never known. "Thank you," she whispered, For what? For seeing me. Really seeing me. Not my father's disgraced daughter or the plain mail-order bride, but just me. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than money. He kissed her forehead. We are going to build something amazing, Evelyn. I promise you that. The months that followed were challenging but deeply fulfilling. Evelyn threw herself into making their small house a home, cleaning and organizing, sewing curtains, planting a vegetable garden, learning to cook the hearty meals Quinn needed for his long days of ranch work. Quinn was patient with her mistakes, never criticizing when supper burned or the bread did not rise properly. He taught her about ranching, about reading the weather and the land, about caring for cattle and horses. She helped him with accounts and paperwork, her education proving valuable in ways Thomas Pritchard had claimed to want but never really appreciated. They worked together in ways that felt like true partnership. When Quinn was laid up for a week with a badly sprained ankle, Evelyn took over the daily chores without complaint, rising before dawn to feed and water the animals, muck stalls, and handle everything that needed doing. When Evelyn caught a terrible cold, Quinn nursed her gently, bringing her soup and tea, reading aloud to her until his voice went hoarse. They had their disagreements, of course. Quinn could be stubborn about accepting help when he was overwhelmed. Evelyn sometimes pushed herself too hard, trying to prove she could handle ranch life. But they learned to talk through their frustrations, to apologize when wrong, to remember that they were partners building something together. Word spread that Evelyn could read and write exceptionally well, and soon families began asking if she would tutor their children. She started teaching 3 afternoons a week in the Johnsons' large barn, which they cheerfully converted into a makeshift schoolroom. The income was modest but helpful, and Evelyn loved the work. Quinn was proud of her, telling everyone who would listen about his brilliant wife, who was bringing education to their corner of the territory. They faced challenges beyond the normal difficulties of ranch life. Thomas Pritchard made trouble when he could, spreading rumors that Quinn had stolen his intended bride, trying to turn other ranchers against them. But Quinn's reputation for honesty and fair dealing served them well. Most people knew Thomas for what he was and chose to side with the younger couple building their life on solid principles. There was one confrontation, 6 months after their wedding, when Thomas rode up to their ranch drunk and belligerent. Quinn met him in the yard and Evelyn watched from the porch with her heart in her throat. "You stole what was mine, Ellis," Thomas shouted, swaying in his saddle. "She was contracted to me. She was contracted to marry you, and she chose not to." Quinn's voice was level but firm. "She had every right to change her mind, especially after the way you treated her. I will see you ruined for this. You and that plain bitch you married." Quinn moved so fast Evelyn barely saw it. One moment Thomas was on his horse, the next he was on the ground with Quinn standing over him. "You will not speak about my wife that way. Not ever. Now get off my land and do not come back." Thomas scrambled to his feet, his drunken bravado deflating in the face of Quinn's quiet fury. He mounted and rode away without another word. Afterward, Quinn stood in the yard for a long moment, breathing hard, his fists clenched. Evelyn went to him and took his hand. "Thank you for defending my honor," she said quietly. "Though I would have preferred no confrontation at all. I know, I am sorry. But I will not let anyone speak about you that way." He pulled her close. "You are my wife and I will protect you, always." Time passed in the way it does when life is full and purposeful. Their first year of marriage became their second. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Quinn bought more cattle, expanded his herd, improved the house bit by bit. Evelyn's school grew too, with more families sending their children to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and happy. Then in the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, Evelyn realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Quinn, and when she did, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around just like he had the day she agreed to let him court her, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. Are you happy?" Evelyn asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. He set her down gently, his hand immediately going to her still flat stomach. "You have given me so much, Evelyn. A home, a partnership, love, and now this. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Evelyn suffered terrible morning sickness for months, and the heat of the summer was especially difficult. But Quinn was endlessly patient and attentive, taking over more of the household tasks, making sure she rested, bringing her whatever she needed. Martha Johnson became a frequent visitor, offering advice and support. Their son was born in December of 1881, a healthy baby boy with Quinn's gray eyes and a good, strong cry. They named him Samuel Ellis, after Quinn's father. Quinn cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he marveled at the tiny, perfect person they had created. "He is amazing," Quinn whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are amazing. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for this gift." Watching her husband hold their child, seeing the love and wonder in his face, Evelyn felt a happiness so profound it almost hurt. This life they had built together, this family, was more than she had ever dreamed possible during those desperate days when she first arrived in Winslow. Samuel proved to be a happy baby, and Quinn was a devoted father. He would walk the floor with the baby for hours when Samuel was fussy, sing to him in a surprisingly good voice, talk to him about the ranch and the horses and everything he wanted to teach his son someday. Evelyn loved watching them together, loved seeing the gentle strength Quinn brought to fatherhood. When Samuel was 6 months old, Thomas Pritchard died. He fell from his horse while drunk, they said, hit his head on a rock, and no one found him until morning. Evelyn felt no satisfaction at the news, just sadness that a man's life had come to such a lonely end. Quinn attended the funeral out of respect for the dead, and they learned that Thomas had left the ranch to a nephew back east who promptly sold it to a family from Texas. "It is strange," Evelyn said that evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset with Samuel drowsing in her arms. "If Thomas had been a different kind of man, I might have married him and my life would be completely different now." "Thank God he was not," Quinn said quietly. "Though I am sorry he never found happiness or redemption. You are a good man, Quinn Ellis." Evelyn leaned against him. "Better than I deserve. That is backwards. I am the one who does not deserve you." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby. "But I will spend my life trying to be worthy of you anyway." The years continued to unfold in a pattern of work and love and family. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose 2 years after Samuel, and another son named Benjamin 3 years after that. The ranch continued to grow, never making them wealthy but providing a comfortable living. Evelyn's school became a permanent institution in the community, moving to a proper building that Quinn and other fathers built together. She taught reading and writing, history and mathematics, to children from families of all backgrounds, Mexican and Anglo and Apache alike, believing firmly that education was for everyone. Quinn proved to have a gift for working with horses, and he gradually shifted more of his focus to breeding and training rather than cattle. He became known throughout the territory for producing horses that were smart, steady, and gentle. People would travel days to buy a horse trained by Quinn Ellis, knowing it would be worth the journey. They had their share of hardships. There were years when drought made everything difficult, when money was tight, and they survived on determination and careful planning. There were winters when sickness swept through the territory, and they held their children close and prayed. There were moments of fear and doubt, times when the challenges seemed overwhelming, but through it all, they had each other. Quinn never stopped looking at Evelyn with love and admiration, never stopped telling her she was beautiful and brilliant. Evelyn never stopped being grateful for the day Quinn Ellis rode up beside that wagon and offered her a choice. They built their life together on respect and trust, and it proved strong enough to weather whatever came. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Evelyn with a new house. He had been building it slowly over the past 2 years, working on it whenever he had spare time, keeping it secret with the help of their children and friends. It was not a mansion, but it was spacious and solid, with real glass windows and wood floors, a large kitchen, separate bedrooms for the children, and even a small room that could serve as Evelyn's study. "Oh, Quinn," Evelyn breathed when he showed her, tears streaming down her face. "It is beautiful. You deserve beautiful things." He took her hand. "You have worked so hard all these years, made do with that tiny house without complaint. I wanted to build you something worthy of you." She turned and kissed him, there in the empty main room of their new house, with their children giggling outside and 10 years of love and partnership behind them. "You already gave me everything I needed the day you offered me a real choice," she said. "This is wonderful, but you are what makes my life beautiful." That evening, after the children were in bed in their new rooms and they lay together in their new bedroom, Quinn pulled Evelyn close. "Do you ever think about that day in Winslow, when you first arrived?" "Sometimes." Evelyn traced patterns on his chest with her finger. "I was so frightened and trying so hard to be brave. I thought I was traveling toward duty and necessity, toward a practical arrangement that would keep me fed and housed. I never imagined I would find this. I knew the moment I saw you." Quinn's voice was soft in the darkness. "When you stepped into that street and calmed storm, when you looked at me with those intelligent eyes, I knew you were going to be important to me. I just did not realize you would become my whole world." "I remember thinking you were trouble," Evelyn admitted with a laugh. "Too handsome, too confident. When you looked at me like I was interesting instead of just plain, it made me nervous. You were never just plain." Quinn rose up on his elbow to look down at her, his face serious in the moonlight coming through their new window. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever known, inside and out. The fact that you cannot see, it just makes me love you more because it means you have no vanity or false pride. You are genuine and real and absolutely perfect. I am not perfect. I am stubborn and sometimes too serious, and I worry too much about everything. Perfect for me then." He kissed her softly. "I would not change a single thing about you, Evelyn Ellis. You are exactly what I needed, even when I did not know I needed it." She pulled him down into a deeper kiss, feeling the familiar warmth and safety of his embrace. 10 years of marriage had not dimmed the attraction between them, had not made their physical relationship routine or boring. If anything, time had deepened their connection, taught them how to please each other, allowed them to communicate without words. Later, as they lay tangled together in satisfied exhaustion, Evelyn thought about the path that had brought her here. If someone had told her, all those years ago on that dusty street in Winslow, that the handsome cowboy with the sage-gray eyes would become her husband and the love of her life, she would not have believed them. She had been too practical, too wounded by her father's failures, too convinced that security was more important than love. Thank God she had been wrong. Thank God Quinn had been stubborn enough to push past her defenses, patient enough to court her properly, loving enough to see her value when she could not see it herself. The years continued to pass, bringing more joys and challenges. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved reading as much as his mother and had his father's gift with horses. Rose was bold and adventurous, always climbing trees and begging to help with the ranch work. Benjamin was the quiet one, observant and careful, who noticed things others missed. Evelyn watched her children grow and marveled that she had helped create these incredible people. Quinn was a wonderful father, patient and firm, teaching them about hard work and honesty, about treating all people with respect regardless of their background, about building something worthwhile with their lives. The territory changed around them. Arizona was moving toward statehood, with more people arriving every year, towns growing, civilization spreading. The wild lawlessness of the early days was fading, replaced by established communities and legal structures. It was still hard country, still demanding, but it was becoming less wild. Evelyn's school thrived, eventually expanding to include older students as well. She taught history and literature, mathematics and science, watching bright young minds develop and grow. Some of her students went on to college back east. Others stayed in the territory, building their own lives and families, but armed with education that opened doors their parents had never had access to. Quinn's reputation as a horse trainer grew beyond the local area. He began receiving requests from as far away as California and Colorado, people willing to pay premium prices for horses trained by Quinn Ellis. He took on a few young men as apprentices, teaching them his methods, enjoying the role of mentor. When Samuel turned 18, he announced his intention to go to college back east. "I love the ranch," he told his parents seriously. "I will always love it, but I want to study law, come back and help people here understand their rights and protect their property. There is so much injustice, people being cheated out of land and water because they do not understand the legal system." Quinn was proud, though Evelyn could see it hurt him a little to think of his oldest child leaving. "You should go," he told Samuel. "Get that education, learn everything you can. The ranch will always be here when you are ready to come home." Rose wanted to be a doctor, which was almost unheard of for a woman, but Evelyn encouraged her daughter's ambitions. "The world is changing," she told Rose. "Women can do more now than they could when I was young. If you want to be a doctor, we will find a way to make it happen." Benjamin, true to his quiet nature, simply wanted to stay on the ranch and work with the horses. "This is where I belong," he said simply, and Quinn understood because that was how he felt too. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole community gathered for a celebration at the Ellis Ranch. The house and barn were decorated with lanterns and flowers. Long tables groaned under food contributed by friends and neighbors. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Martha Johnson, now in her 60s but still spry, pulled Evelyn aside at one point. "Do you remember that morning after you left Pritchard's place, when Quinn came to tell us he was going to court you proper?" "I remember." Evelyn smiled at the memory. "I told my husband that night," I said, "Ben, that girl is going to marry Quinn Ellis and they are going to have a beautiful life together, and I was right." Martha squeezed her hand. "You two have built something wonderful. You should be proud." "I am." Evelyn looked across the yard to where Quinn was dancing with Rose, both of them laughing at something. Samuel was showing Benjamin some complicated dance step, while a circle of young people watched and clapped. "I am prouder than I ever imagined being. Not just of Quinn and our children, but of our whole life together. We built this through hard work and love. And you started with nothing but courage and determination," Martha pointed out. "Remember that when you wonder if you have made a difference." You and Quinn have shown people what a real partnership looks like, what a marriage based on respect and love can achieve. That matters. As the evening drew to a close and guests began to depart, Quinn found Evelyn and led her away from the crowd to a quiet spot by the creek where they had shared so many important moments over the years. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Ellis." He pulled a small package from his pocket. "I got you something." Inside was a beautiful pair of spectacles with delicate wire frames. "Quinn, these must have cost a fortune. They are from a catalog special ordered. I noticed your old ones were getting bent and the glass was scratched. I wanted you to have nice ones." He helped her put them on, adjusting them carefully. "There. Now you can see clearly again. I can see everything that matters." She looked up at him, seeing him sharp and clear through the new lenses. 20 years ago, I thought I could see my future clearly. I thought I knew what I needed. I was so wrong. No regrets, not a single one." She took his hands. "Quinn, do you remember what you said to me when we first met? When I apologized for not being what Thomas Pritchard pictured?" "I remember." He smiled. "You said you were not what he pictured, and I said you were better than any dream I had. It was true then, and it is true now. I was so convinced I was not enough back then. Not pretty enough, not refined enough, just a desperate woman with no options. But you saw something in me I could not see in myself. I saw who you really were, brave and brilliant and beautiful. You just needed someone to show you." He pulled her close. "And you saw something in me too. You could have accepted my help and still gone back east, could have kept looking for security with someone more established. But you took a chance on a poor cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. Best decision I ever made." She kissed him softly. "You have given me everything, Quinn. Love, family, purpose, a real home. I spent the first 23 years of my life feeling like I was not enough, and I have spent the last 20 years knowing that I am exactly enough because you love me for who I actually am. You are more than enough. You are everything." He rested his forehead against hers. "Here is to 20 more years and 20 beyond that if we are lucky. I want to grow old with you, Evelyn. I want to watch our children build their own lives, meet our grandchildren, sit on our porch when we are gray and remember all the adventures we had." "That sounds perfect." She wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "Although I hope some of our best adventures are still ahead of us. With you, every day is an adventure." He kissed her again, deeper this time, with the passion that had never faded between them. "I love you, Evelyn Ellis, today, tomorrow, and every day after. I love you too." She smiled against his lips. "My cowboy with sage gray eyes who saw past the plain mail-order bride to the woman underneath. You saved me, Quinn." "No." He pulled back to look at her seriously. "We saved each other. I was building a ranch, but I was lonely, convinced I would always be alone because I wanted partnership more than I wanted possession. You showed me that real love exists, that building a life together is better than building alone. We are a team, Evelyn. Always have been, always will be." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their children waiting on the porch, the lights of their home warm and welcoming. This was what mattered, Evelyn thought. Not the house or the ranch or the success they had built, but this. Family, love, partnership. The knowledge that they had created something real and lasting together. Time continued its march forward. Samuel left for college, then returned 4 years later with a law degree and a pretty young wife. He set up practice in Winslow and immediately began helping people who had been cheated or taken advantage of, fighting for justice with the same principles his father had taught him. Rose, against considerable odds, was accepted to a medical college in California. She wrote letters home full of excitement and determination, describing her studies and her dreams of returning to practice medicine in Arizona. Quinn and Evelyn were fiercely proud of their daughter's courage in pursuing such an unconventional path. Benjamin stayed on the ranch, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations as Quinn began to slow down with age. He married a local girl named Sarah, and they built a house on the property near Quinn and Evelyn's. Their first child, a daughter, was named Evelyn after her grandmother. As Quinn and Evelyn moved into their 50s, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. They were not old yet, but they were no longer young. Quinn's hair had gone silver at the temples, and his face showed the weathering of decades under the Arizona sun. Evelyn's hair had streaks of gray she made no effort to hide, and fine lines bracketed her eyes and mouth. But when Quinn looked at her, she knew he still saw the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. They spent their evenings on the porch of the house Quinn had built for her, watching the sun set over their land while Benjamin and Sarah's children played in the yard. Sometimes Samuel and his wife would visit with their 2 boys. Rose came home whenever she could between her medical studies and later her practice. The house was often full of family and noise and laughter. "We did well," Quinn said one evening as they watched little Evelyn chase her brother around the garden. "Our children are happy and successful. Our grandchildren are healthy. The ranch is thriving. We have good friends and respect in the community. We did well, Evelyn." "We did," she agreed, taking his hand. "Though there were times I doubted we would make it, especially those first few years when everything was so hard. I never doubted." He squeezed her hand. "Not once. From the moment you agreed to let me court you, I knew we would build something amazing together. You were always more optimistic than me. I had reason to be. I had you." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You know what I was thinking about today? That photograph Pritchard sent you, the one that made him look younger and more prosperous than he really was. The false promises he made in his letters. The whole deception that brought you west in the first place. Strange thing to think about after all these years. Not so strange. Because that deception, as awful as it was, brought you here. If Pritchard had been honest from the start, you might have declined his offer and stayed in Boston. You might have married someone back east eventually, and I would have spent my life never knowing you existed." He turned to look at her seriously. "I should probably be grateful to him, in a twisted way. His dishonesty gave me the greatest gift of my life." Evelyn considered this. "I suppose that is one way to look at it. Though I prefer to think that fate or providence or whatever you want to call it would have brought us together somehow. We were meant for each other, Quinn. I believe that. So do I." He pulled her close, and they sat together watching the sky turn from blue to pink to purple as the sun sank toward the horizon. "Do you ever miss Boston, your old life?" "Not even a little bit." The answer came without hesitation. "My life there ended when my father died. Coming west gave me a chance to build something new, something better, and meeting you gave me a real home for the first time since I was a child." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "This is where I belong, with you." They sat in comfortable silence until the children were called inside, and darkness settled over the ranch. Then they went inside themselves, to the home they had built together, filled with the memories of 30-plus years of marriage. That night, lying in bed with Quinn's arm around her, Evelyn thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Winslow so many years ago. She had been desperate and alone, traveling toward an uncertain future with a man she did not know. She had been so sure she was not enough, not pretty or refined or valuable enough to deserve real love. How wrong she had been. How grateful she was to have been wrong. Quinn's breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of sleep, but he pulled her closer even in his dreams, as if his body knew to hold her tight even when his mind was not conscious. This, Evelyn thought, this was what mattered. Not beauty or refinement or social status, but this quiet love that had sustained them through decades of challenges and triumphs. She had traveled 2,000 miles looking for security and had found love instead. She had settled for practical necessity and had been offered genuine partnership. She had thought herself plain and unremarkable and had been shown she was valuable and treasured. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, though she was not sure if she was thanking Quinn or God or fate itself. "Thank you for seeing what I could not see. Thank you for loving me when I did not think I deserved love. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." The years continued to unfold in their gentle rhythm. Samuel's law practice grew successful, and he became known as a champion of justice for the overlooked and marginalized. Rose returned from California as Dr. Rose Ellis, one of the first female doctors in Arizona Territory, and opened a practice that served everyone regardless of ability to pay. Benjamin expanded the ranch's horse breeding operation until Ellis horses were renowned throughout the West. Quinn and Evelyn became grandparents 7 times over, and then great-grandparents as their oldest grandchildren began families of their own. They watched Arizona achieve statehood in 1912, celebrated in the streets of Winslow with their children and grandchildren. They saw the automobile arrive, the telephone, electricity reaching even their remote corner of the desert. They grew old together, slowly and gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. Quinn's hands became gnarled with arthritis, but they still reached for Evelyn's every day. Evelyn's eyesight weakened despite her good spectacles, but she could always see Quinn clearly. Their steps slowed, but they still walked together every evening, circling their property hand in hand. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered once again. 3 generations of Ellises filled the house and yard, along with friends from every corner of the territory. Samuel gave a speech about his parents' example of true partnership. Rose talked about how her mother had encouraged her impossible dreams. Benjamin simply said that his father had taught him that good work and honest dealing were worth more than shortcuts and schemes. When everyone had said their piece and eaten their fill and the party was winding down, Quinn led Evelyn away one more time to their spot by the creek. They moved slowly now, supporting each other, but they still made the walk. 50 years, Quinn said wonderingly, settling beside her on the bench he had built by the water years ago. "Half a century since that day in Winslow when you stepped off the stagecoach and I knew my life was about to change. I was so frightened," Evelyn remembered. "So determined to be brave and practical. I thought I had my future all planned out. A practical marriage to a practical man for practical reasons. Instead you got me," he smiled. "A poor cowboy with big dreams and bigger determination. I got everything I never knew I needed." She took his weathered hand in hers. "Love, partnership, adventure, family, purpose. You gave me all of it, Quinn. We gave it to each other." He raised her hand to his lips just as he had done thousands of times over 50 years. "I meant what I said, you know, that first time we really talked. You were better than any dream I had, you still are. And you saw something in me I could not see in myself. You made me believe I was worthy of love. You always were worthy, I just helped you recognize it." He shifted to look at her directly. "Evelyn Ellis, you have made my life extraordinary. Every single day with you has been a gift. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, every challenge and struggle just to end up here with you. So would I." Tears slipped down her weathered cheeks. "I love you, Quinn. Today, tomorrow, and every day after, just like you promised me 50 years ago. I love you too." He kissed her gently, sweetly, with 50 years of love behind it. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for seeing past the poor cowboy to the man who would love you forever." They sat together as the sun set one more time over their land, over the life they had built together through hard work and love and unwavering commitment to each other. Behind them, they could hear their family laughing and talking, the sound of multiple generations gathered in love and celebration. This was happiness, Evelyn thought. Not the desperate grasping for security she had felt on that stage coach so long ago, but this deep contentment that came from building a life with someone who truly saw you and loved you anyway. This peace that came from knowing you had lived well and loved deeply and left the world better than you found it. The stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, the same stars that had watched over them for 50 years of marriage. Quinn pulled Evelyn close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart that had been the soundtrack of her life for half a century. "No regrets?" he asked softly, repeating the question he had asked on their 20th anniversary. "Not a single one," she answered, just as she had then. "You were right, Quinn. From the very beginning you were right about us. We were meant for this, meant for each other." "I was meant for you," he corrected gently. "You were the gift I never expected, the dream I never dared to have. The woman who changed everything." They sat together until full darkness fell, and their grandchildren came looking for them, worried about them sitting outside in the cold. But even as they allowed themselves to be led back to the warmth of the house, their hands stayed clasped together, just as they had been for 50 years of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, ordinary days and extraordinary love. That night, lying in bed in the home Quinn had built for her decades ago, Evelyn thought about all the moments that had brought them here. The frightened woman stepping off the stage coach, the kind cowboy offering help to a stranger, the confrontation with Pritchard, the escape in the night, the courtship by the creek, the wedding surrounded by friends, the birth of their children, the building of their legacy, 50 years of moments both momentous and mundane that had woven together into a life well lived. "Quinn," she whispered in the darkness. "Yes, love. I would choose you again. Every time, in every circumstance, I would choose you. And I would choose you." His arm tightened around her. "Forever and always I would choose you." They drifted into sleep together, as they had done for 50 years, secure in the love they had built and the life they had shared. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, bearing silent witness to the extraordinary ordinary life of two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful together. The story of Quinn and Evelyn Ellis became legend in their corner of Arizona, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. People told the tale of the mail-order bride who escaped a bad situation and the cowboy who offered her a real choice. They spoke of the partnership that had built a successful ranch and raised remarkable children. They pointed to the Ellis family as proof that love based on respect and genuine caring could weather any storm. But for Quinn and Evelyn themselves, it was never about being an example or a legend. It was simply about loving each other well, every day, in the small moments and the large ones. It was about choosing each other again and again, through youth and middle age and into the golden years of their lives. It was about building something real and lasting together, something that would outlive them both in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. They lived to celebrate their 60th anniversary, surrounded by family and friends, still holding hands and still looking at each other with the same love that had bloomed by a creek in Arizona territory all those decades ago. They passed within months of each other, Quinn first and then Evelyn, as if she could not bear to be parted from him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their long lives. But their real memorial was not stone and names. It was in the children who had learned about love and partnership from their example. It was in the grandchildren who carried their values forward. It was in the friends and neighbors whose lives they had touched with their kindness and integrity. The ranch continued to thrive under Benjamin's careful stewardship, eventually passing to his children and then their children. Samuel's law practice became a multi-generational family firm known for fighting for justice. Rose's medical practice evolved into a clinic that served the underserved for generations. The Ellis name became synonymous with fairness, hard work, and genuine caring for others. But perhaps the greatest legacy Quinn and Evelyn left was simply this: the proof that love, real love built on respect and partnership and genuine caring, was possible even in the hardest circumstances. That two people, starting with nothing but courage and determination, could build something extraordinary together. That beauty existed not just in physical appearance but in character and kindness, and the willingness to see beyond surface to substance. Evelyn had stepped off that stagecoach thinking she was not enough, believing she had to settle for practical necessity over genuine connection. Quinn had seen past her doubts to the remarkable woman underneath. And together, they had proved that the best love stories are not about perfect people finding each other, but about real people choosing to build something beautiful together, day by day, year by year, challenge by challenge. Their story ended, as all stories must, but the love they built lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched. And somewhere, perhaps in whatever comes after this life, two souls walked hand in hand still, the cowboy with sage gray eyes and the woman who had been brave enough to choose love over security, partnership over practicality, and authentic connection over false promises. They had started as strangers on a dusty street in Winslow, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1878. They had ended as legendary partners whose love story would be told and retold for generations. But for Quinn and Evelyn themselves, it had simply been about loving each other well, every day in every way, for as long as they both lived. And that, in the end, was the greatest romance of all.